Hey friends, this is Dolynny TV. Good morning, welcome into it as we get set up to, Monday edition. Of course, for those of you wondering what's going on really with this video, this was recorded Sunday afternoon, just a little filler material to get your week started, I guess you could say. Of course, a lot of talk about Ken Holland the past few weeks. The Oilers in desperate search of either a goalie trade, defenseman trade, anything to make this team a little bit better than they have been to start the year. The results from Anaheim, I don't know what they are in this video. We'll talk about it a little bit later on Sunday, which is earlier for you. Don't worry about it. It'll all make sense in a few days. But no, as it currently stands, friends, I just want to take a moment on this Sunday as I'm getting ready to prepare this for Monday to look at Ken Holland's best and worst trade as Edmonton Oilers General Manager. I think we can all, as soon as I say the words worst, I think we can all sit here and think of exactly the one. But when we think about Ken Holland's best trade as Edmonton Oilers General Manager, to some of you there might not be one, but to those of you that kind of look at the Oilers over the past few years, kind of look at what needs got addressed, what needs didn't get addressed, and how the trades played out following that move, I think there is one that stands above, even though it was short-lived for the Edmonton Oilers. Friends, I'm Tyson, this is Dolynny TV. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you. If you are new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button here on Dolynny TV. Closing in on 13,600 subscribers today. Closing in on obviously 15,000 hopefully by the end of the year. All right, without further ado, I think when I'm joking about we all know which one is the worst. Yeah, you know exactly where we're going, right? The AA trade of February 24th, 2020. This one had a lot of promise, friends, right? Athanasiou that year was riding hot. He was on a terrible Detroit team. And somehow still Ken Holland managed to have to pay 2 second rounders and a guy who was doing not too bad, relatively speaking, within the Oilers' role he was in Sam Gagner, for Andres Athanasiou and Ryan Kuffner, who, there was not much, if anything, there for the Edmonton Oilers over those few short months Ryan Kuffner was within the organization. But Andres Athanasiou, you don't need to look at the stats. You don't need to look at anything. The fact that the Oilers threw themselves in a situation where the qualifying offer was more than they could afford, they were going for broke and fast. And, the Oilers ended up going broke fast, right? That series against Chicago, one of, if not the most nightmare-fueled things that I've ever had to endure doing this job. It was the catalyst behind the eventual downfall of that version of Dolynny TV, and obviously too the catalyst for what I could describe as a journey I took over a span of a year and a half to get back to YouTube and just become a much better version, much better person overall than I was. So yeah, that one threw us a lot for a loop, and obviously I don't need to tell you who Detroit picked with those second rounders. That is the trade, right? When you sit here and you're spitballing with your friends 15 years from now, talking about Ken Holland's worst trade as Edmonton Oilers general manager, that is the one that will stand above all else. 9 games and a few games in the play-ins for Andres Athanasiou producing no results with the Edmonton Oilers. That was nightmare fuel, and it will forever continue to be, because even just going back, looking, hindsight's 2020 right now, but going back, looking at it in the year 2023, I can still feel the mental damage from that. Obviously, that season going the way it did, and the season ending in the play-ins the way it did, right? I always used to call it playoffs. Here I am calling it play-ins in the year 2023. Not good. Heebie-jeebies, friends. Anyway, all right, let's go to the best, and this is where I don't think anybody is necessarily going to be screaming and jumping, agreeing with me. But when I talked about earlier, sitting here and saying, hindsight's 2020, and when you talk about addressing the need, addressing what the team had been looking for, and I think Ken Holland here, reflecting back on his time with the Oilers 10, 15 years from now himself, would say he nailed it with the Duncan Keith trade. This was perhaps the best trade Ken Holland will ever make as an Edmonton Oilers general manager, which sounds silly and backwards for what we thought this trade was actually going to be the day it was made. To be honest with you, can't fully remember my reaction. I was a lot lost at that point. Okay, friends, it was, whew, there was a lot I was going through at that point, and I was unpacking. You didn't hear much from me at those moments, and obviously, yeah, no, I'm better for it now. But yeah, so Duncan Keith comes aboard. Nobody expects nothing. Puts up 21 points in 64 games that season. Provides 20 minutes a night. Steady Eddie defending. The Oilers get better and better as the season goes along. Ken Holland obviously fires Dave Tippett that year, brings in Jay Woodcroft. It's a meteoric rise from there. Team takes off, goes into the playoffs. And there's a reason why this Duncan Keith trade to me is the best as opposed to the Mattias Ekholm deal. Mattias Ekholm, don't get me wrong, that's awesome. It'll go down as the best long-term deal that Ken Holland made, no doubt. But when it comes to the best trade Ken Holland made, the Duncan Keith one hits it on the mark, right? Again, similar to Athanasiou, except you give up way less. I was very opposed to giving up Caleb Jones, but hindsight's 2020 now. And obviously, too, you only give up a third-round pick for a veteran guy. And as you say, Ken Holland, I mean, you ask him anytime, hey, if you get a chance to acquire a guy like Duncan Keith for that cost, are you going to do it? The answer is going to be a 10 out of 10, 100% yes, because you look at the effects of Duncan Keith that year. The Oilers got a guy who was steady on the back end, could ride the waves of emotion throughout 60 minutes, playoff game, whatever it needed. Obviously, the Oilers ended up going 4 games against Colorado in the Western Conference Final, not the second round against Vegas, Western Conference Final, in which it felt from the majority of those games, the Oilers were a goal away from the series having a different outcome. Not saying the Oilers would have won, but obviously not being a sweep. That's kind of where we're going. So the Oilers were that close in 2022, and a big part of that is having a guy like Duncan Keith around and having him in the room, having him playing hockey for you, giving you a 19, 20 minutes a night, and a guy that could step up and be capable of leading the team when the younger guys like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl needed that voice in the room that had been there, done that, and obviously done some stuff prior to showing up to Edmonton. So at the end of the day, when you look at a pure organizational move from Ken Holland in terms of addressing what the team needed to get where he wanted it to be that year, Duncan Keith's trade is going to go down as Ken Holland's best. Now, Mattias Ekholm, like I said, is worth mentioning. So too is Klim Kostin's trade. That is 100% fair. If you want to sit there and say that Klim Kostin is the best trade Ken Holland made, sure, absolutely. But again, that's looking at it almost very one-dimensionally, I think, in terms of, oh, I really wanted a player that does this. He got it. That's my best trade. That's kind of slanted, I feel. Whereas you look at the overall effect a guy like Duncan Keith had on the team going throughout that season and into the playoffs, I think addressing the core need of the team at that point is huge, because Duncan Keith didn't just address like grit or whatever you want to say Klim Kostin did. No, it addressed several organizational issues that have been around for time eternal since I've been a hockey fan with the Edmonton Oilers. So yeah, that's where there's a couple of good ones from Ken Holland, but the best one is going to be the Duncan Keith trade, I think. Obviously, we've got, just about 6 months left of Ken Holland as Edmonton Oilers General Manager. I guess the question to end this video, and if you want to have your say in the comments below, is his best trade yet to come, or is his worst trade yet to come? That's where it really stands to reason. And maybe standing pat here on this Sunday so far, as I record this, is not a bad thing that Ken Holland just stayed put and didn't trade a guy like Jack Campbell or somebody else on the roster for a massive loss in terms of draft capital, in terms of prospect capital, whatever the case might be. I guess the only thing is, I'm looking back at this as a retrospect, only a few short years removed. Time ultimately tells all, and we'll see what happens here with Ken Holland in his final 6 months as Edmonton Oilers General Manager. Friends, I'm Tyson. This is Dolynny TV. Have a great afternoon. Have a great rest of the workday, and I will catch you as we debrief all the news of the day here at the end of this fine Monday. I am up on out of here.